I remember the exact moment I realized I'd become invisible. It wasn't dramatic, there were no tears, no shouting, no doors slamming. Just silence. The kind that wraps around your throat and squeezes until you forget what your own voice sounds like. It was a Tuesday evening in late October. The kind of evening where the air smells like burning leaves and promises you haven't kept. I was standing in my kitchen. The same kitchen I'd stood in for 23 years, staring at a grocery receipt that totaled $347 for a dinner party. A dinner party I didn't even want to throw. Babe, did you get the aged parmesan? The real stuff, not the garbage in the green can. That was Marcus, my husband. The man who once wrote me poetry on napkins and stayed up all night talking about our dreams. Now he communicated in grocery lists and disappointed sighs. I got it, I said, my voice barely reaching across the kitchen island. He didn't look up from his laptop, just nodded. A single efficient acknowledgement that I'd completed my task, like checking off an item on a to-do list. Buy expensive cheese. Check. Wife still functional, check. The dinner party was for his colleagues. 8 people I'd never met. Wouldn't remember, and who certainly wouldn't remember me. But it mattered to Marcus. His promotion depended on impressions, connections. The right wine paired with the right conversation. And I was expected to orchestrate it all with the same invisible efficiency I'd perfected over 2 decades. Our daughter, Chelsea, appeared in the doorway, phone glued to her hand like a life support system. She was 17, beautiful in that careless way teenagers are. Completely unaware that every door in the world would open for her simply because she existed. Mom, I need the car tomorrow night. Jamal's picking me up, but I need it for after. I have my book club tomorrow night, I said gently. I've had it on the calendar for 3 weeks. She rolled her eyes. The universal teenage gesture that translated to your life is so unimportant it literally doesn't register in my consciousness. Mom, this is important. There's a party at Madison's, and everyone's going to be there. Everyone. The word that nothing and everything when you're 17. Chelsea, I've cancelled the last 2 book clubs. I really need to. Whatever. She cut me off, already turning away. I'll just tell everyone my mom doesn't care about my social life. And she was gone. Vanished up the stairs like smoke, leaving behind the faint scent of her vanilla perfume. And my unfinished sentence hanging in the air. Marcus still hadn't looked up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to my husband, listening to his steady breathing, and tried to remember the last time he'd asked me about my day. Not as a formality, not as a preamble to asking me to do something. Just, ask. The ceiling fan rotated slowly above me, casting shadows that looked like prison bars across the white ceiling. When had I become the supporting character in my own life? When had my entire existence shrunk down to the space between other people's needs? I thought about my book club. The one I'd started 6 years ago with 3 other women from the neighborhood. Sarah, who taught high school English and had laugh lines that made her look wise instead of old. Michelle, who'd survived breast cancer and wore scarves in her hair like crowns, and Diane, who'd divorced her husband at 52 and started a bakery that now had 3 locations. They were real. They saw me. When I talked, they listened. When I laughed, they laughed with me, not at the punchline, but at the joy of it. But I'd cancelled on them twice already. Once for Marcus's work dinner. Once for Chelsea's emergency that turned out to be helping her find the perfect outfit for a date. And now she wanted me to cancel again. The ceiling fan kept spinning. My husband kept breathing. And somewhere deep in my chest, something small and vital started to crack. The morning of the dinner party arrived with the kind of cold gray rain that makes everything feel heavier. I woke at 5:30. Even though the party wasn't until 7. My mind was already running through lists: appetizers, main course, dessert, wine pairings, table settings, conversation topics to avoid, conversation topics to encourage. I moved through the house like a ghost, preparing a feast for people who would never know my name. By 4 o'clock, everything was ready. The house smelled like rosemary and roasted garlic. The table looked like something from a magazine, each place setting arranged with the precision of a museum exhibit. I'd even put fresh flowers in the bathroom, because apparently that's what you do when you want strangers to think your life is perfect. I went upstairs to get ready, opening my closet to face the usual question: which version of invisible did I want to be tonight? I reached for the navy dress. Safe. Elegant. Forgettable. As I zipped it up, I caught my reflection in the full-length mirror. 46 years old, still attractive, I supposed in that way people describe china patterns. Pleasant. Coordinated. Appropriate. But when had I last felt beautiful? Not pretty or presentable. Beautiful. The kind of beautiful that makes you stand taller, that makes you feel electric in your own skin. I couldn't remember. Downstairs Marcus was setting out the whiskey for his boss. He looked up when I entered. "You look nice," he said. The same words he'd used for 23 years. You look nice. Not beautiful, not stunning nice, like a well-chosen throw pillow. Thank you, I said. Because that's what you're supposed to say. The guests arrived promptly at 7. Marcus transformed instantly into the version of himself I barely recognized anymore. Charming. Engaging. Funny. He told stories with animated gestures, laughed with his whole body, asked questions like he genuinely cared about the answers. I watched him from the kitchen as I arranged stuffed mushrooms on a serving platter, and felt something close to grief. This man still existed. He was just no longer available to me. I brought out the appetizers, smiled, offered drinks, laughed at jokes I didn't think were funny. Listened to a woman named Patricia talk about her Pilates instructor for 15 minutes without once asking me a single question about myself. By the time we sat down for dinner, I'd spoken maybe 30 words. All of them functional. Can I get you anything? More wine? I'm so glad you could make it. The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. Marcus held court at the head of the table, telling a story about a disastrous client meeting that somehow ended in triumph. Everyone laughed. His boss clapped him on the shoulder. "You're lucky to have such a wonderful wife," the boss said, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "This meal's incredible." Marcus smiled. "I really am," he said. But he was looking at his boss, not at me. Halfway through the main course, Patricia turned to me with the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So, Emily, what do you do?" The question every stay-at-home mother learns to dread. What do you do? As if keeping a human being alive, running a household, managing schedules, budgets, emotions, and crises didn't count as doing something. "I'm a homemaker," I said, using the word that always felt like an apology. "Oh, how wonderful," she said, in that tone that meant the exact opposite. I could never. I'd go absolutely insane without my career. I smiled, nodded, said something gracious about how everyone's path is different. Inside, I felt myself shrinking even smaller. After dessert, after coffee, after the endless goodbyes and the promises to do this again soon, the house finally emptied. Marcus loosened his tie and grinned. "That went perfectly," he said. "Richard loved you." Richard, his boss, who'd spoken to me exactly twice. "I'm glad," I said, gathering place. Marcus said, "You've done enough. I'll help you clean up tomorrow." But tomorrow came, and Marcus had an early meeting. And the day after that, and the day after that. The plates sat in the sink. The leftover food congealed in Tupperware, and I cleaned it all up alone, just like I always did. That Friday book club was meeting at Sarah's house. I'd already cancelled twice. I couldn't cancel again. Wouldn't. I told Marcus that morning. "I have book club tonight," I said, trying to sound casual. "I'll leave dinner in the fridge." He looked up from his phone, confused. "Tonight? I thought we were watching that documentary." We'd never discussed watching a documentary. But that was Marcus's gift. Creating plans in his head and expecting me to psychically know about them. "I've had this scheduled for 3 weeks, I said. "I've already cancelled twice." "Babe, it's just book club. Can't you reschedule?" "Just book club. Just the one thing I did for myself. Just the one evening a month where I existed as something other than wife, mother, housekeeper, social coordinator." "No," I said, "I can't." He stared at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. "Seriously, I barely get to see you as it is, and you're choosing your book club over me." The irony was so thick I could taste it. He barely got to see me, the man who I saw every single day, who I cooked for, cleaned for, organized for, existed in service of. But somehow, the 3 hours I wanted for myself were too much. "I'm going," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Something flashed across his face. Surprise maybe. Or anger, I couldn't tell anymore. "Fine," he said. "Do whatever you want." And he left. Just walked out the door without another word. Like a child who didn't get his way. I stood in the kitchen, my hands shaking, and realized something. I was afraid. Not of Marcus. But of this feeling. This small, bright spark of defiance that was growing in my chest. What if I liked it? That evening I drove to Sarah's house with the windows down. Even though it was cold. I needed the air. Needed to feel something other than suffocated. Sarah answered the door with a glass of wine already poured for me. "You made it," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt like coming home. Inside, Michelle and Diane were already settled on the couch, shoes off. Snacks scattered across the coffee table like an invitation to relax. "We were starting to think you'd become a myth," Diane teased, "the woman who used to come to book club but now only exists in memory." I laughed, but it came out shaky. Sarah noticed immediately. "You okay?" And that's when it happened. That's when the dam broke. I started crying, not delicate tears, big ugly shoulder-shaking sobs that came from somewhere deep and old and exhausted. They didn't tell me to calm down. Didn't ask me to explain. They just surrounded me, these three women who barely knew me. But somehow saw me more clearly than my own family. When I could finally breathe again, I told them everything. The dinner party, the invisible feeling, Marcus's dismissal, Chelsea's casual cruelty. The slow, steady erosion of myself into something I didn't recognize. "When did I become so small?" I whispered. "When did I stop mattering?" Sarah handed me another tissue. "You didn't stop mattering, Emily. You just stopped fighting to be seen." Michelle leaned forward, her eyes fierce. "I almost died 3 years ago. You know what I learned? Life's too short to live it for people who don't appreciate you." "But they're my family," I said. "I can't what?" Diane interrupted. "Can't ask to be treated with basic respect. Can't expect your husband to value your time. Can't teach your daughter that your needs matter too." She said it so simply, like it was obvious. Like I wasn't asking for too much. "What if I lose them?" The question came out small and scared. "What if you lose yourself?" Sarah countered. "What's left of you if you keep giving pieces away to people who don't even notice they're taking them?" We talked for hours. About boundaries and self-worth and the 1,000 tiny ways women are taught to disappear. They shared their own stories. Michelle's chemotherapy while her husband complained about dinner. Sarah's ex-husband who forgot her birthday for 5 years straight. Diane's awakening at 52 when she realized she'd spent 30 years trying to be small enough to fit into someone else's idea of who she should be. "So what did you do?" I asked Diane. "How did you stop?" She smiled. "I started saying no, and then I started saying yes. No to things that made me small. Yes to things that made me feel alive." It was terrifying. But you know what was more terrifying? The idea of being 80 years old and realizing I'd spent my entire life waiting for permission to exist. When I got home that night, the house was dark. Marcus was already in bed, his back turned to my side. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, looking at this man I'd loved for so long, and felt nothing but exhaustion. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I slept in. When I finally came downstairs at 9:30, Marcus was annoyed. "There's no coffee made," he said, like I'd forgotten to pay the electric bill. "You know how to make coffee," I replied calmly. He stared at me. "What's going on with you?" "I'm tired," I said. And it was true. I was tired of being invisible. Tired of being taken for granted. Tired of shrinking myself to fit into the margins of other people's lives. Over the next few weeks, I started small. I stopped canceling book club. I started saying no when Chelsea demanded the car without asking. I let Marcus's dry cleaning sit at the cleaners an extra day because I was reading a book I actually enjoyed. Tiny rebellions. Small assertions of self. But they felt monumental. Marcus noticed. Of course he did. When your appliance stops working the way you expect, you notice. "You've been different lately," he said one evening. Not concerned. Accusatory. "I've been here the whole time," I said. "You just never looked." "That's not fair." And I laughed. Actually laughed. Because fair was me doing everything while being appreciated for nothing. Fair was my needs always coming last. Fair was being treated like a service provider in my own home. "You're right," I said. "It's not fair. None of this is fair." The conversation that followed was long and painful. Marcus was defensive, then angry, then confused. He genuinely didn't understand why I was unhappy. In his mind, he was a good husband. He worked hard, he didn't cheat, he came home every night. And technically, he was right. By the lowest possible standard, he was a good husband. But I didn't want the lowest standard anymore. I wanted partnership. I wanted to be seen. I wanted my existence to matter beyond what I could provide. I don't know how to fix this, he finally said, and for the first time in years, he looked vulnerable. Start by asking me about my day, I said, not as a formality. Really listen. See me as a person, not as a function. I do see you. Marcus. You don't even know what book I'm reading. You don't know the names of my friends. You don't know what I dream about or what scares me, or what makes me happy. You know what I do for you. That's not the same thing as knowing me. He had no response to that. Neither did I. We sat in our beautiful house, surrounded by all the trappings of a successful life, and faced the truth we were strangers who shared an address. The weeks that followed were uncomfortable. Marcus tried. In his way, he asked questions that felt rehearsed, made gestures that seemed calculated. It was a start, but it felt hollow. Like he was following a script to fix a problem he didn't fully understand. Chelsea was worse. She saw my boundaries as betrayal. You've changed, she accused one night when I said no to last-minute babysitting for her friend's little sister so she could go to a concert. You're right, I said. I have changed. I'm remembering that my time has value too. You're being selfish. The word hummed between us, selfish. The weapon used against women for generations. The shame button designed to make us comply. If taking care of myself is selfish, I said quietly, then I guess I'm selfish. She stormed out, slammed her door, and I sat in the kitchen, hands shaking, but somehow proud. Proud that I'd stood my ground. Proud that I was teaching my daughter, even if she hated me for it right now, that women are allowed to have boundaries. 3 months after that first book club night, I made a decision. I enrolled in a pottery class. Something I'd wanted to do for years but never had time for. Every Wednesday evening, I went to a small studio downtown and worked with clay. Got my hands dirty. Made things that were imperfect and beautiful. Made things that were mine. Marcus complained about the timing. It was right during dinner. Who would cook? You will, I said. Or you'll order takeout. Or you'll figure it out. You're a capel. Looked at me like I'd suggested he build a rocket ship. But the first Wednesday came and I went. And when I came home, the kitchen was a disaster. But there were empty pizza boxes on the counter and Marcus and Chelsea were laughing about something on TV. They'd survived without me. The world hadn't ended. By the 6th week of pottery class, I'd made 3 balls, a lopsided vase, and something that was supposed to be a mug but looked more like a small misshapen cup. I loved every single piece. They were imperfect and honest and entirely my own. One evening, my instructor, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and paint-stained fingers, pulled me aside. You're getting better, she said. But more than that, you look happier. Lighter. I feel lighter, I admitted. She smiled. That's what happens when you stop carrying other people's expectations. You remember how to stand up straight. That night, I came home to find Marcus sitting at the kitchen table, my book club book open in front of him. I wanted to see what you've been reading, he said, looking almost shy. To understand what you talk about with your friends. It was such a small gesture. But it was the first time in years he'd shown genuine curiosity about my inner life. What do you think so far? I asked. It's good, he said, sad. But good the main character reminds me of. He paused. I sat down across from him. How so? She's strong, he said. But nobody sees it. They just see what she does for them, and she lets them. Until she doesn't anymore. We looked at each other across that table. Really looked, and something shifted. Not fixed. Not healed. But shifted. Like a door that had been locked for years had finally been opened a crack. I don't want to lose you, he said quietly. I didn't realize I was losing you until you started fighting to stay. I don't want to lose you either, I said. But I also can't keep losing myself. So what do? We'll learn, I said. We try, we mess up and apologize and try again, and maybe, eventually, we remember how to be partners instead of just people who live in the same house. It wasn't a Hollywood ending. There was no swelling music, no passionate kiss, no instant transformation. Real life doesn't work that way. But it was a beginning. A small, fragile, honest beginning. Chelsea took longer. Teenagers are stubborn. And she'd spent 17 years learning that my love was unconditional. Which meant she never had to earn it or respect it. But slowly, as I held my boundaries, something changed. She started asking instead of demanding. Started saying thank you instead of assuming. Started occasionally asking how my day was. One Saturday morning, she came into the kitchen while I was having coffee and reading. "Can I ask you something?" she said, hovering in the doorway. "Of course. Why did you start being so different?" I set down my book. "I didn't start being different, sweetheart. I started being honest. There's a difference. But you used to always help me. Always be there. I'm still here," I said gently. "I just can't be the only one showing up anymore. Relationships go both ways, even between mothers and daughters." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I never thought about it like that." "I know," I said. "And that's partly my fault. I taught you that my needs don't matter by always putting them last. I'm trying to teach you something different now." "It's hard," she admitted. "I don't like it." "I know. Change is hard. But you're going to grow up and have your own relationships, your own boundaries to set. I want you to know that it's okay to ask for what you need. It's okay to expect respect. It's okay to say no." She nodded slowly, processing. Then she did something that surprised me. She sat down at the table. "What are you reading?" she asked. We talked for 20 minutes about the book, about the characters, about life. Really talked. Not as a mother managing a child's schedule, but as two people sharing thoughts. When she left, I sat in the kitchen, tears streaming down my face. Happy tears, grateful tears. I was still here, still Emily. But I was also something more now. Something I'd forgotten I could be. I was myself. 6 months after that first book club night at Sarah's house, we were all gathered again. This time at my house. I'd made food I actually enjoyed making, poured wine I'd chosen, created an evening that felt joyful instead of performative. We talked about the book. But we also talked about our lives. Michelle's cancer was in remission. Diane's bakery was opening a 4th location. Sarah had started dating again, cautiously but hopefully. And me. I'd quit trying to be perfect and started trying to be present. I'd let my family see me as I was, flawed and human and worthy of respect. To Emily. Sarah raised her glass. "For finding your voice." "I didn't find it," I corrected, "I just finally used it." We clinked glasses. These 4 women who'd each fought their own battles to be seen. To matter, to exist as more than what others needed them to be. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I stood in my kitchen surrounded by dishes and laughter and evidence of a life fully lived. Marcus came downstairs drawn by the noise. "Sounds like you had fun," he said. "I did," I replied and meant it. "Want to help me clean up?" He grabbed a dish towel. We worked side by side in comfortable silence, and for the first time in years, it felt like partnership. As I wiped down the counter, I caught my reflection in the window. 46 years old. Laugh lines around my eyes. Hands that were capable and strong. A woman who'd almost disappeared but chose to stay. I didn't look invisible anymore. I looked free. And if you've ever felt like you're disappearing, if you've ever wondered when you became the supporting character in your own story, if you've ever been afraid to ask for what you deserve, I want you to know something. Your voice matters. Your needs matter. Your existence matters beyond what you can provide for others. It's never too late to start showing up for yourself. It's never too selfish to ask to be seen. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply say, "I'm still here, and I matter," because you do. You really, really do. The end.